Once upon a time, in the quiet village of Umuagu, lived a woman named Olana, whose life was filled with both love and sorrow. Her skin glistened like polished ebony, her eyes carried the weight of storms, and her voice could hush even the loudest child. She had once been the wife of Obi, a strong hunter whose laughter echoed through the hills, but his sudden death had turned her world upside down. The only light that remained in her darkness was her baby boy Chiemeka, whose birth had given her a reason to live after her husband's burial. To Olana, that child was not just flesh and blood, he was hope itself, wrapped in tiny swaddling clothes. But where love bloomed, jealousy and hatred slithered. Obi's family, cold and proud, never accepted Olana. They whispered that she had killed their son, and when they looked at Chiemeka, they did not see an innocent child. They saw the continuation of a bloodline tied to a woman who they so despised. Hatred festered in their hearts, and this hatred grew darker as each day passed. Whenever Olana cooked, her sister-in-laws, Nkechi and Amaka, would sweep into her hut and seize the whole pot, leaving Olana her child without food. Olana was forced to beg her neighbors for food. Her sister-in-laws, hell-bent to make her suffer, lied to the neighbors that Olana was cursed, that she brought misfortune wherever she went, and that anyone who helped her would inherit her bad luck. Many believed the lies, and soon even those who pitied her stopped offering her food. When Olana went to fetch water from the stream, they mocked her openly, sometimes pouring sand into her pot or striking it from her head so it shattered on the ground. If your son is truly a blessing, Amaka sneered one day, let him drink the dust that you love so much. Olana wept quietly, clutching her baby tighter, but she refused to answer their cruelty with words. Each time little Chiemeka cried, her sister-in-laws would yell angrily at her, telling her to shut the mouth of her bastard child. Are you the first to have a child in this village? Why must our ears suffer this kind of discomfort? Take that child far away from here, if you can't shut its mouth, they said to Olana, who carried her baby far into the bushes to comfort him. Olana could not believe how her in-laws treated their own blood, an innocent child who had tasted wickedness right from the womb. They never saw him as their own and treated him worse than an abomination, all because he came from a woman who they so despised. A woman who did nothing but marry their brother. A relationship that they kicked against from the start, all because Olana was the daughter of a woman who their mother swore was her sworn enemy. Although Olana's mother died a few years ago, the bitterness in their heart towards her mother did not wane. Her mother-in-law, a woman of high standing in the community, became Olana's greatest tormentor. She never forgave Olana for being the daughter of the woman who she had sworn to hate. To her, Chiemeka was not her grandson. He was a reminder of the enemy that she so despised. One afternoon, when the baby was barely 3 weeks old, Olana's mother-in-law stormed into her hut, her eyes blazing like fire as she found Olana rocking her baby to calm his cries. Without a word, she snatched the baby from her arms and dangled him in the air, saying, "This child is a curse." She spat, her voice cutting like a whip. The blood of his mother's people flows in his veins. He is no grandson of mine, because if he was, he wouldn't be crying like a weakling. Men from my bloodline are strong men like my son that you killed. If only Obi listened to me and married the woman that I chose for him, he would be here today. But he decided to fall in love with a witch like you, who killed him in his prime and is trying to force a bastard child down my throat. I, Madam Chi, will not sit back and watch your seed pollute my bloodline, she said to Olama, who fell to her knees begging. Please, Mama, my son is innocent. He is your son's blood. If there's anything I've done to warrant this level of anger, I am sorry, Mother. Please forgive me, Olana said to Madam Chi, who fled up in anger as she dropped the baby to the ground like trash. Let him taste pain early, because painful will be his life here on earth. Olana watched in pain agony as her baby cried out in pain. Her heart broke, to see how wickedly her husband's people treated her child. She screamed until her voice broke, clutching her son to her chest as she watched her mother-in-law walk away as if nothing had happened. Olana from that day knew that her fight was not only against her sister-in-laws, but also against the venom of the matriarch herself. Her suffering deepened when they stole the only fine clothes that she owned, a dress that her husband Obi had given to her before his death. The only dress that Olana wore whenever she wanted to feel close to her husband. The one thing that made her feel that her husband's presence still lingered in their lives. One morning, she found it gone, only to see Nkechi tearing it apart to make rags. Olana cried out in pain as she began to speak. "Nkechi, that cloth is all I have left of my husband." But Nkechi laughed her in the face as she continued to tear the dress apart. Olana watched as Nkechi used the dress to mop the dirt off the floor. She tossed it back to Olana, who she told to get out of her sight. Olana returned to her room and wept like a child. She held her son in her arms, thankful to have a child who not only brought comfort to her heart, but also gave her hope in the midst of all the chaos. One afternoon, whilst it was raining heavily, Madam Chi forced Olana to go to the farm alone. Widowhood is no excuse for laziness. She barked as Olana picked up her hoe and headed straight for the farm. She walked under the heavy rain, leaving her baby alone in her hut. Olana prayed and hoped that her baby would be asleep. A few hours later, after walking under the rain for hours, Olana returned to meet her hut empty. She searched everywhere for him, but her son was nowhere to be found. Olana screamed out in pain. She rushed to her mother-in-law to ask about her child, but Madam Chi sneered at her and informed her that her child was dead. "How can God give a careless woman like you a child? You left him all alone to die, and now you are here blaming me for your carelessness," she said to Olana, who stood there confused as she tried to understand what she was talking about. "My son cannot be dead," Olana managed to whisper as Madam Chi pointed towards the tree outside her hut. "If you are looking for your cursed child, why don't you check under the tree and stop disturbing my ears with your useless cries?" Olana screamed until her voice broke. Her nails dug deep into the earth as she knelt under the tree. The soil gave way beneath her hands, but neighbors gathered quickly to stop her. In their village, it was an abomination for a woman to dig open a grave. They held Olana down, reminding her of the consequences of going against the village tradition. Olana could not contain the pain that she felt in that moment. She looked straight at Madam Chi, who stood tall at the entrance of the compound, her arms folded as she lied to the people that the baby died because of Olana's carelessness. She left the child all alone in the rain and went out to frolic with other men in the village, she said to the people, who all looked at Olana with their judging eyes. The people all believed her story, but only Olana knew the truth, that her baby was killed and buried by her husband's people. She fell to her knees, her heart splintering, as her wails pierced the night like a song of grief that even the gods could not ignore. For days, she refused to eat. Olana lit a small fire by the graveside each night, singing songs to her dead child. "Sleep, my son, sleep. If you are in the earth, let your mother's love reach you." 7 nights passed, and Olana sat by her son's grave broken. Her sister-in-laws mocked and laughed at her, saying that if she loved her son so much, then she should go down 6 feet to stay with him. Olana was filled with so much fury. She refused to respond to them, knowing that life has a way of repaying people of their evil. Rather, she cried out to her son for justice. "Chiemeka, my light, if you truly lie in this earth, then may the heavens not sleep until your blood is avenged. May those who poured sand on your breath drink of the same soil. My son, rise against them even in your death." The villagers heard her voice echoing through the night like thunder, but none of them dared to silence her. They whispered among themselves that grief had driven her into madness, but Olana's words carried the weight of truth that even the wind could not ignore. By the 8th day, the soil began to stir. At first, it was subtle, a small rise, as though the earth itself was breathing. Then, It began to grow taller, jagged, harder, until it stood like a black tower before her eyes. It was an ant hill, unlike any seen before, alive with heat and swarming with furious red ants. The villagers gathered, trembling as they whispered amongst themselves that the ant was not ordinary. Days went by, and the ant hill grew taller with each passing day. By the third week, it stood taller than any man, casting a long shadow across the tree where the child was buried. At night, strange sounds came from within the hill, whispers, cries, and the furious marching of unseen ants. Sometimes, red ants poured out in endless streams, crawling across the earth in formation, only to vanish back inside before the break of dawn. The villagers were so petrified, they avoided the spot, claiming that it was cursed. Yet, Olana never left. She sat beside the ant hill, her face gaunt, but her eyes burning with hope. "My son is here," she whispered. They buried him, but the earth refused to keep him hidden. Her in-laws began to grow restless. They claimed that Olana was a witch who was using her witchcraft to conjure her evil to accuse them falsely. They plotted to destroy the anthill, but every attempt of theirs failed before their eyes. The anthill continued to grow taller, as if fed by an unseen force. Soon, the whispers within it began to form words, and some villagers swore that they heard the faint cry of a baby coming from the hill. Mothers warned their children not to go close to the hill, and the people trembled, knowing that the earth had been provoked. Madam Chi and her daughters refused to run away, stating that doing so would mean accepting defeat to Olana. Instead, they plotted on how to send her away from their home. Madam Chi set fire to her hut, hoping to send her out with that. Olana returned home from the stream to find her hut on fire. She knelt by the anthill, her tears dropping to the floor as the whole ground began to shake. Suddenly, the anthill cracked open and a swarm of red ants began to pour out. The ants did not move wildly like other ants. They moved in perfect formation, like soldiers marching under command. The neighbors gathered in fear as the ants marched into Madam Chi and her daughter's hut. They were all asleep when the ants entered and began to crawl up their entire body. They tried to run, but every path they took was blocked by another wave of furious ants. Their cries for mercy tore through the village as they begged the villagers to save them. "Save us! Somebody save us!" They screamed, but no one dared to go near their hut, for the people knew that this was no ordinary ant. It was judgment, and no one dared to interfere with it. By dawn, Madam Chi and her daughter's swollen bodies were found outside their hut, their faces frozen in expressions of terror, their eyes wide and lifeless. The villagers trembled in terror as they tried to understand what was happening. Then, as if the earth itself wanted to bring light after darkness, a figure stepped forward from the edge of the gathering. A woman, cloaked in fine silk, her eyes glowing with strange wisdom, cradled a child against her chest. The villagers gasped, their mouths falling open as they watched her approach Olana, who staggered to her feet as she whispered her son's name. "Chiemeka." The woman nodded gently as she revealed to Olama that her son did not die. "My name is Efere, the priestess of the neighboring village. On the night when they buried your son, I was passing through the bushes when I saw your wicked mother-in-law and her daughters digging the earth. I watched as they lowered your baby into the shallow earth and covered it. I could not allow such wickedness happen, so I dug him up and carried him to my house, where I kept him safe till this time." The villagers opened their eyes in shock. Some covered their mouths in shame, remembering how they had mocked Olana when she cried and clawed at the earth. Efere raised her voice as she continued to speak. "But I didn't stop there. I called upon the gods of the earth and gave judgment into the hands of the ant. For what is buried unjustly must return, and those who mock the innocent will taste the bitterness of their own cruelty." She pointed at the swollen corpses of Madam Chi and her daughters. "This is the fruit of their hands. They sowed death, and so they harvested death." Olana fell to her knees, tears flowing freely as she stretched her arms to take her son. She pressed him tightly against her heart as tears of joy poured down her eyes. The villagers, ashamed of what they had done, began to apologize for all that they did to her. Olana rose, her face streaked with tears, as she began to speak to the people, saying, "The earth has fought for me. My son lives, and the wicked are no more. Let this be a lesson to Umuagu. Never again shall a woman be despised for the sins of her mother. Never again shall an innocent child be punished for a sin that they did not commit," she said as she thanked the priestess for saving her child. From that day on, the anthill stood as a reminder of justice. No one touched it, for they believed the spirit of vengeance had risen through it. Olana, however, took over the entire compound. She raised her son in peace as the people learned their lessons not to jump into conclusions. The lesson to be learned from this story is that wickedness never goes unpunished. What Madame Chi and her daughters thought they had buried in secret, the earth itself refused to keep hidden. Their cruelty was exposed, and their own evil became the pit that they fell into. The story also teaches us that innocence always finds a defender. Though Olana was mocked, shamed, and left alone, the ants became the soldiers of justice, showing that even the smallest of creatures can bring down the proud when heaven gives the command. The villagers too learned their lesson that it is dangerous to believe lies and join in mocking the afflicted. They realized that a mother's cry reaches farther than human ears, and when a wronged mother calls for justice, the heavens do not sleep. I hope you enjoyed the story.